She was 8 months pregnant, alone, and forced to scrub floors on her knees. Her husband trusted his mother to protect her. Instead, she became her tormentor. What happens when the man who loves her finally comes home? This story will break your heart and heal it. Watch until the end. The first contraction hit Stella at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, but it wasn't the baby coming. It was her body giving its first warning, a deep, grinding cramp that shot from her lower back straight through her swollen belly as she hauled a heavy bucket of water from the kitchen to the corridor. She stopped, pressed her hand to the wall, breathed. Then she kept moving because Mama Chukwu was watching from the doorway with eyes that had long stopped seeing a pregnant woman and only saw a problem she intended to fix. 3 weeks earlier, life had been different. Emeka had carried her hospital bag to the car himself, triple-checked the zip, and then stood in the living room doorway staring at her like a man memorizing a painting. "I don't want to go," he said. Stella smiled and touched his face. "It's 2 weeks. I'll still be here when you come back, and so will she." She pressed his palm to her belly. He laughed softly when the baby kicked, and for a moment the whole house felt warm and permanent, like nothing could enter it without permission. He had thought of everything before he left. The house help, a quiet girl named Chidinma, had been hired 2 months earlier specifically so Stella wouldn't strain herself in the final stretch of the pregnancy. The fridge was stocked. The doctor's number was pinned to the kitchen board. And his mother, Mrs. Ngozi Chukwu, had traveled in from Enugu with her traveling bag and her Bible and her opinions, and Emeka had held her hands at the door and said, "Mama, she is everything to me. Take care of her." His mother had smiled and said, "Is she not my daughter?" Chidinma was gone by the 3rd morning. Stella had woken to raised voices downstairs and come to find Mrs. Chukwu standing at the front door with Chidinma's bag already outside on the step. "She is lazy," Mrs. Chukwu said before Stella could speak. "She mops and leaves water on the floor. She cooks without seasoning. I have managed for 2 days, but I will not manage anymore." Stella stared at the door closing behind Chidinma and felt something cold settle in her chest. "Mama, Emeka hired her specifically for Emeka is not here," Mrs. Chukwu said simply, and walked to the kitchen to begin rearranging the pots. The first week was manageable. Stella told herself it was manageable. She swept. She mopped. She cooked the long, slow soups that Mrs. Chukwu preferred, the kind that required standing over a hot stove for 40 minutes with a wooden spoon. She washed plates. She folded laundry. Each task cost her more than it should have. Her feet, already swollen from the pregnancy, puffed further by the end of each day until her slippers left deep red bands across her skin. She called Emeka twice and told him things were fine because he was finalizing a deal worth 3 years of their lives, and she did not want to be the voice that cracked his focus. What she did not tell him was that Mrs. Chukwu had taken to inspecting her work. The older woman would run a finger along the top of the refrigerator and show Stella the dust on her fingertip without saying a word. She would lift the pot lid during cooking and make a sound through her nose, not disapproval, not approval, just a sound that meant Stella was being observed and found insufficient. "A woman who cannot manage her home cannot raise a child properly," Mrs. Chukwu said one afternoon while Stella was on her knees scrubbing the bathroom tile. Stella said nothing. Her knees were aching. The baby was pressing down hard on her pelvis. She kept scrubbing. The second week, the conversations became worse. Stella tried once. She stood in the kitchen, one hand braced on the counter because standing straight for too long now sent shooting pains up her spine, and she said quietly, "Mama, the doctor said I shouldn't do heavy lifting or prolonged standing." Mrs. Chukwu turned from the window. "Doctor." She said the word like it was a foreign concept. "My mother had 8 children. She farmed throughout every pregnancy. Nobody gave her a note from a doctor." "I'm not your mother," Stella said. The silence that followed was so complete that the sound of traffic from outside felt far away. Mrs. Chukwu looked at her a long, measuring look and then said, "No, you are not. Finish the kitchen before dinner." Stella called her own mother that night, lying on her back in the dark with the phone to her ear, keeping her voice low so it wouldn't travel through the walls. Her mother was quiet for a moment after hearing everything and then said, "Come home." Stella closed her eyes. "I can't come home, Mama. This is my home." Another silence. "Then call Emeka. He's closing the deal this week." "He's Stella." Her mother's voice was tight. "You are 8 months pregnant." Stella pressed her lips together. "I'm fine," she said. "I just needed to hear your voice." She wasn't fine. By the start of the 3rd week, she was waking before 5 in the morning because that was when Mrs. Chukwu's footsteps began on the floor above, which meant breakfast needed to start. She was moving through the days in a fog of exhaustion so deep it had texture, like walking through water. She ate when she could, but appetite had left her. The baby, usually active in the evenings, had begun to feel heavy and still in ways that frightened her at night when she lay alone listening to the dark. The neighbors saw. Mrs. Adiz from next door passed her at the gate one afternoon and took one long look at Stella's face and said, "My sister, are you all right?" Stella forced a smile. "Just tired." Mrs. Adiz looked toward the house. She opened her mouth, closed it, said, "Take care of yourself," and moved on. There are many ways to fail a person, and silence is one of them. It was a Thursday evening when Stella almost collapsed. She had been carrying a basket of wet laundry from the bathroom to the backyard line. The basket wasn't extraordinary in size, but the day had already taken everything from her, and the weight of it combined with a sudden sharp pain below her ribs made her vision tilt sideways. She grabbed the bathroom door frame and stood there for what felt like a long time, breathing carefully, the basket on the floor at her feet, one hand on her belly talking to her baby without words. I'm here, stay with me." Mrs. Chukwu walked past the doorway, glanced at her and said, "Don't leave that basket on the floor." Then she was gone. Stella hung the laundry herself, piece by piece, in the fading light, with one hand on the line for balance. That night she finally texted Emeka, "I miss you. Come home soon, *." He replied within minutes, * landing Friday evening. "Can't wait to see you. Is everything okay, *." She stared at the question for a long time. Then she typed, "yes. Just miss you, *." He saw her from the front gate. He had barely closed the taxi door before he stopped walking. Stella was in the front yard, bent at an angle that was wrong, not wrong for anyone else, wrong specifically for a woman who was 8 months pregnant, wrong in a way that meant something had been draining from her for weeks. She was picking up fallen leaves from the pathway, one by one, moving slowly, one hand pressed to her lower back. The evening light caught the exhaustion in her face before she even looked up. When she did look up and saw him, her expression didn't break into a smile the way it always had before. She just looked at him. And that absence of the smile hit Emeka harder than anything else possibly could have. "Stella." He was across the yard in seconds. "What? Why are you?" He took the small bundle of leaves from her hands and gripped both of her wrists gently, looking at her. Really looking. The shadows under her eyes. The way she was standing. "How long have you been doing chores?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Her eyes filled. "Come inside," she said softly. "I'll explain inside." He sat beside her on the bed with both her hands in his and listened without interrupting, which was the hardest thing he had ever done. Stella spoke quietly, without drama, which made it worse. She described the last 3 weeks the way someone describes a dream they've already half accepted, and every detail landed on him like something heavy. The house helped send away. The daily cooking, cleaning, scrubbing. The bathroom on her knees. The laundry line in the evening. The day she almost fell. The neighbor who saw. The nights alone. When she finished, she wasn't crying. She was simply looking at him with tired eyes, waiting. Emeka was very still for a moment. Then he stood up. His mother was in the living room watching a program on television when he came downstairs. She looked up. "You're back. Did you eat?" "Stella don't." His voice was quiet, but it stopped her completely. He stood in the middle of the room and looked at his mother, this woman he had trusted above almost everyone, this woman he had held at the door and said take care of her, and the distance between who he had believed her to be and who she had shown herself to be felt immeasurable. "Mama," he said, "what did you do to my wife?" "I taught her." She almost fell. He said it simply, without raising his voice, and something in his stillness made it worse than shouting. She is 8 months pregnant, and she almost collapsed carrying laundry. Alone. In this house. While you were here. His mother opened her mouth, and he shook his head slowly. I asked you to protect her. Those were my exact words. You were supposed to protect her. I was preparing her. For what? Now the emotion cracked through, sharp and final. For what, Mama? She is having my child. She is not your project. She is not something to be hardened. She is my wife. He pressed his hand flat against his chest. She is mine to protect, and I left that to you, and he stopped. Drew a breath. You cannot stay here. The silence in the room was absolute. Mrs. Chukwu stood slowly. There was a rigidity in her face that looked, from certain angles, like dignity, but Emeka had grown up in this woman's house, and he knew it was pride, which is a different thing entirely. You are choosing her over your own mother. I am choosing right over wrong, he said. Pack your things tonight. I'll drive you to the park in the morning. She left in the morning without looking at Stella. The door closed behind her, and the house, for the first time in 3 weeks, felt like it belonged to someone who loved what was inside it. Emeka spent the next 4 days undoing what 3 weeks had done. He cooked. He ran her bath. He sat at the foot of the bed and massaged her feet with the specific firm pressure she had shown him early in the pregnancy and he had quietly memorized. He called a new house help by the end of the first day, a calm, experienced woman named Mrs. Okoro who arrived with her own apron and immediately took over the kitchen with the quiet competence of someone who had done this for years. He called the doctor and arranged a checkup and held Stella's hand through the entire appointment and didn't breathe properly until the doctor confirmed that the baby's heartbeat was strong. At night, lying beside her with his hand on her belly, he said, I'm sorry I left you alone with her. Stella was quiet for a moment. You didn't know. I should have known better, he said. I should have put things in place that didn't depend on someone else's character. She turned her head to look at him in the dark. You couldn't have predicted this. Maybe not, he said. But I promise you, no one will ever be in a position to hurt you like that again. Not in my house. Not with my name. She held his hand tighter and didn't say anything, because sometimes the right thing has no response and doesn't need one. 3 weeks later, at 6:14 in the morning, their daughter was born. She arrived with the kind of urgency that babies seem to reserve for moments when everything is finally, genuinely safe, as if she had been waiting for peace before making her entrance. The delivery room was bright and loud and chaotic in all the right ways, and Emeka was there for every second of it. Holding Stella's hand through the contractions with a grip so firm she later told her mother she'd had to remind him she still needed the hand afterward. When the baby was placed in Stella's arms, she was perfect and round and furious about the world she'd arrived in, which felt about right. Emeka stood over both of them and his face held an expression that had no clean name, somewhere between gratitude and relief and a fierce, permanent declaration. He kissed Stella's forehead. She leaned into it and closed her eyes. Outside the window, the morning was beginning. Inside, a family had survived what had been done to it and come out the other side holding something new, fragile and breathing and entirely, completely theirs.